Welcome to the Global WEF Nexus Community Podcast. I'm Assi and joined here with me and Chisa. Today, we're very happy to have us two of incredible guests with us who are deeply involved in the symposium, the upcoming symposium, which is the 7th International Symposium on Knowledge and Capacity for Water Sector, Empowering a New Generation. The symposium will bring together sector organizations, knowledge institutions, and policymakers to explore the significant shifts that have taken place in the water sector over the past decade.
Thanks, Rewa. Hello, everyone. The symposium also plays a vital role in enhancing the ability to address interlinked resource challenges holistically. You can visit the symposium website to register for the online participation, but however, please note that the in-person capacity has been reached, and only online participation is currently available at this time. Registration is open until the 26th of May, and it is completely free, so we look forward to everyone taking part.
Thank you, Anne, for this information. And before we dive into the discussion, let's introduce our guests. First, we have with us Jeltsje. Jeltsje is an associate professor of the Water Governance and Justice who engages with critical theory and interdisciplinary research approaches to understand how injustice can be challenged in and around the water and agriculture. She's also a key member of the program committee for the symposium. And hi, Jeltsje.
Hi, and joining us from the scientific committee, we have Professor Graham Jewitt. Graham joined IHE Delft Institute of Water Education as a professor of hydrology in 2019, and in 2024, he was appointed the vice rector. Prior to joining the institution, he was the director of the Center for Water Resource Research and Mgeni Water Chair of Water Resource Research at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Thank you, Jeltsje and Graham, for joining us today. We are so excited to have this conversation with you and hear more details about the symposium that I'm sure the aim is to empower young professionals in the water sector.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you.
So let us just start and let the audience, whoever is hearing us today, to know more about the symposium. If you can, Jeltsje, if you can just give us an overview of the 7th International Symposium on the Knowledge and Capacity for the Water Sector, what can the attendees expect from this symposium?
I think it's going to be 3 very exciting days full of interesting sessions on water and reflecting on what is happening in the water sector in relation to capacity development and knowledge production. I think the symposium is also going to offer very good network opportunities with other organizations and experts working on water. We have 4 tracks in the symposium that all offer very interesting sessions, one on sustainable development goals, one on tools for capacity development. Another session engages with partnerships that are needed to invest in capacity development. And there's also a track on inclusivity. So I think it's going to be very nice and very interesting for all kinds of different water sector specialists. And we hope that the symposium will also result in a very progressive new Delft agenda on knowledge and capacity development for the water sector. So we are looking forward to welcome everyone in Delft.
Wow, it sounds so exciting. Thank you so much for that overview, Jeltsje. Graham, over to you. As a member of the scientific community, or committee rather, what are some of the key scientific discussions and research that members can anticipate from the symposium?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Well, at the outset, what I should say is that this is not a truly scientific conference. It's really one focused on generating impact and momentum around this issue of building capacity to support water-related education, training, but really in service of some of the sustainable development goals and our global water agenda, where we know the SDGs are coming to an end in 2030. We have to think about what's next. what we have seen very clearly over the past few years is there's an incredible need to enhance the capacity and build new capacity in water resources management all across water. And there's a major gap, and we just haven't been able to achieve that. Now, this is the 7th symposium we are holding. The 6th one was in 2020, and that moved online because of COVID. So it's a bit of a different conference this year. So we're really happy to be able to see people in person. But there were a couple of key messages that came out of the 2020 conference. And Jeltsje referred to what was called the Delft Agenda. And and the history of that is that there was the Delft Statement in the 2020 agenda symposium. And we want to refresh that and update it completely at the end of the symposium. There are a couple of key points out of that 2020 symposium which we can pick up on a little bit later in the discussion, because I think some of them are quite relevant to the question you just asked, Anne.
No, thank you so much for that overview. And we're pretty excited, like you said, to have people in person, and we can't wait to delve more into some of these key issues that you're talking about. Jeltsje, I wanted to take it back to you. Can you share some key sessions or workshops that the symposium has designed to empower young professionals and to engage them in practical water management solutions? As you said, that there's going to be various different types of stakeholders at the symposium.
Yeah, thanks a lot. As I already mentioned, there are 4 different tracks, and I think all of them have very exciting sessions and wherein presentations are given on relevant topics related to the symposium. In particular, I can tell a little bit about the track on the inclusivity, in which I'm involved myself as well. And I think there are 2 sessions to highlight that are of particular interest, I think, for the younger generation. So one of the sessions is a roast, in which the younger generation will actually roast the older generation, which are 3 well-known professors who are willing to share on stage their brilliant failure and reflect on how those failures have shaped their careers. And we will have representatives of the younger generation who will actually roast those professors and ask them critical questions, to also discuss how knowledge is always temporarily, in the sense that it's always evolving, always new insights are on the horizon, and to reflect together also what that means about what we know about water right now and how we understand it and how that shapes our interventions, perhaps also how that might change in the future. Another session that I think is very interesting for the younger generation is that we are facilitating an intergenerational dialogue in which the younger generation can actually share their view and their perspectives on water-related issues and how they think water knowledge production on water, but also capacity development could be improved to be more effective and to really make sure that we address the needs of the water sector in terms of knowledge and skills required to address the current problems and future problems, of course.
This is very interesting, and I see like a bidding as well to see how this relationship would be between the young generation and the senior professionals. And one of the main challenges that we see from the younger generations is that they're not having, a platform to speak up or to show their motivation in the water sector. This is one of the most challenges that we hear in the sector, and I believe that the symposium is actually acting upon this challenge, whereby having this intergenerational dialogue and space for the younger generation to actually criticize, or not just criticize, maybe have a critical overview of what is the sector now doing. So this is interesting on this. And if you may just, given these circumstances, is there any challenges that you believe that or let's say the biggest challenges that the young professionals are now facing in the water sector, and how can we actually face these or address these challenges?
Yeah, I think the young professionals, they somehow have inherited a world in crisis, both in terms of environmental degradation and pollution, but also stark injustices in how water is distributed. Moreover, the collaboration in the world is, I think, very much affected by very conservative political forces at the moment, trying to divide people. But also academic censorship is on the rise in some places. On the other hand, I also think that the younger generation is much better equipped to address challenges as they have more experiences, for instance, with interdisciplinary thinking, and inclusivity is for them often a normality. And of course, there are many technological advantages these days, and I think the younger generation is much more acquainted to work with these technologies. So I think they also are better equipped to address some of these challenges. But that also means that, yeah, we need to learn together. It's not that the older generation has all the knowledge and the skills and knows how to solve the problem. And it's also not that the younger generation can do it by themselves. But I think we really need to have this dialogue and this collaboration and learn from each other on how to deal with these huge challenges that the world faces, also in terms of capacity needed to solve these problems.
Maybe I can add is I don't want to preempt the outcome of the conference because the Delft statement this year will be led by our PhD community at IHE Delft, but really bringing in the voices from the younger generation that we hear during the conference. One thing maybe just to add to what Jeltsje said is what we are seeing is that there's a bit of a gap between older people with grey beards sitting in capacity development situations and younger people coming in. So there's a bit of a generational gap, which we're struggling to fill, I think. There's a real, if you think of a pipeline, there's a bit of a bubble there. There's a gap. So we would really like to see more and more people engaging in active capacity development across the water sector. And the form of that, of course, is something which we want to discuss during the conference, because it is, the future is not the same as the past. There will be lessons we can learn from the past, but there are many, many things that are changing, which we need to be aware of, from the state of the world that Jeltsje has described to new AI tools and things like that. Maybe just to add, as we do have we have two very exciting keynote speakers. The opening address will be given by former Minister Retno Marsudi from the Republic of Indonesia, who is the special envoy on water for the United Nations. She's a very inspiring speaker, but representing the younger generation is Anita Soina, who is a young Kenyan woman, very active in water and climate. She's a water and climate activist. So we're looking forward to her really setting the scene at the opening address.
It is exciting. So Graham, here you mentioned about the relationship between, covering this gap between the older generation and the younger generation. So if we need to talk about, as your role as a vice rector for IHE, and you oversee the educational programs, how do you see the relationship between the education, research, and the practical application in the water sector? How is this, can we connect those two, provide a holistic perspective on the water sector?
Yeah, well, I think at IHE Delft, we've got quite a unique opportunity. What we see in traditional universities, if you like, is we have the education, which is degree training, BScs, MScs, and you have research. And often the research does feed back into the education programs, but it's at quite a high theoretical level, and it takes a lot of time to sort of embed. At IHE, what we have as a very strong component of our work is a professional training program, non-degree education. And that builds quite dynamically, and it is very responsive to the needs that we see from our collaborators and partners and from our alumni. We've got nearly 30,000 alumni around the world. Now, And Rewa, of course, is one. Yeah. So, and the nice thing about the professional training is you can respond quite rapidly to needs that are expressed with active research. So we have a lot of projects where the research we're doing is taught quite quickly in the professional program. And if that embeds well and works well, it then moves into our formal degree education program. So we see that nice link between research practice, which is the big gap in many of those things, and the degree education. Now, the other thing about the non-degree education is that in the professional, especially the younger professionals around the world, we are seeing more and more of a demand for lifelong learning and micro-credentials, badging, things like that. So people are constantly reskilling or upskilling, but they need recognition for that. Mm-hmm. And there are different ways of doing that as people build through their careers on a particular skill or discipline, or want to move into another field. So we see that professional training, the non-degree education, is a very important part of our portfolio and a very useful one through which we make a lot of impact, and hope to continue to do so more effectively in the future, because that's something which I hope will come out of the conference is, what do young people really want from this type of education?
Thank you so much for that, Graham. I want to go a little bit off script and bring Jeltsje in, because we keep emphasizing that one of the key issues for the symposium is it's attracting young people, right? And even our audience that we are putting out to this podcast to is a community of practice, young professionals. So from the planning committee side, Jeltsje, we've already said that things have the in-person numbers have already closed. So when you look at it, have young people responded to this type of opportunity to actually want to attend the symposium when you look at that number? Because it sounds very, very exciting. I'm not in water, but I wish I was so that I could come. But I just wanted to check that. Have they responded to this call, this opportunity that you have created for them for the symposium?
That's a very good question. I don't know the numbers of who's attending in terms of age. I think it's very common that at many conferences it are often the older generation who is actually well represented, because of course attending symposia also depends on funding being available, especially if you need to travel to Delft all the way. So it's quite expensive in that sense. So what we see in general is that at these kind of events, it are often the older generation, which is of course part of the problem, because if we want to empower the younger generation, they also need to be there. Mm-hmm. So what we did on purpose, and I think that has had an effect. Graham already mentioned that one of the keynotes at the beginning, at the opening, is a representative of the younger generation, and also in several of the other tracks we have particularly focused on having speakers invited and panelists invited who are the younger generation. So in that sense, we really try to ensure that that they are well represented, that they are here. I think also from the persons I've seen on the list, there are quite a number also among those who attend the symposium from the younger generation. So for certain, that is something we paid attention to, and we try to facilitate as much as possible in the selecting speakers, but also those who are attending. It's a pity that the in-person attendance is full at the moment. I know they're still looking into opportunities. Maybe not everybody will actually come in the end, so maybe some places will free up. So I would also encourage people to still let us know that you want to join. At the same time, I think online participation is also something to consider. We have learned from COVID, unfortunately, that sometimes we need to move online. This event, we try to have fully hybrid and also are working on making the online attendance as interactive and attractive as possible. For certain, in some of the sessions, we really try to also make use of all kinds of new tools and technologies to really involve the online public. So I also hope that that those who cannot travel here can still participate and be with us and share their insights and participate and contribute to the symposium. And that is the nice thing about online, that you can reach a much wider, more inclusive audience, I would say. So I'm happy to also see many people who have registered online.
Oh, fantastic.
I can update you on the numbers if you like. We have, at the moment, about 780 people registered.
Wow.
We can host 320 at IHE. And the rest are going to be participating online. Of those, 40% are from academia, 20% from government, and 20% from NGOs. And then we have other people, 14 or 15% from the private sector and others. We do have a lot of youth representatives, but as Jeltsje pointed out, one of the difficulties we face is that it's a reality that more established researchers or people in NGOs have better access to funding. So the online component is important. And we see that in a lot of the education and training that we do. And maybe just to bring this into the water, energy, food nexus community, because this is, of course, the community of practice, which arose from much of the water, energy, food nexus training that we've been doing over the past 4 or 5 years. We've just completed the 2025 masterclass, which is the prerequisite for our face-to-face training. And we had nearly 200 people online each day of that masterclass.
Wow.
People are now busy completing that course. And of course, then the limitation becomes with the face-to-face training, where we can only support perhaps 20. So the online mechanisms and those tools are really a good way of reaching people.
I just want to say I fully agree with Graham. I think that is an opportunity there. And I think also, we try to, as organizers, to make that as attractive as possible as well.
I love the fact that people are really taking, the opportunity to go online. Like you said, we as young people, we might not have the funding, but we have the computer, we have the laptop, we have Wi-Fi, and this is the greatest way for us to get this type of information. Graham, you gave us all these wonderful statistics of the attendees, and it really paints a wonderful picture of the types of people who are going to be attending. And we can see it's bringing together various stakeholders, right? So earlier on, we spoke about the types of dialogue that we can expect in the symposium. So with all these different types of people who are attending, young people, people in government, people in the private sector, etc., what are some of these conversations that need to happen between people in the water sector and the other industries?
Well, I think Jeltsje hinted at some of them in the description of the tracks. I think, but just going outside of the tracks a little bit, when we look at what are the really topical things that we're seeing at the moment, and one is in 2030, we move beyond the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what follows? Okay. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals were a very effective way of bringing different communities together, which hadn't spoken together before, well, not always effectively. And there's lots that you can criticize about the Sustainable Development Goals, but it was a fairly inclusive process as far as the UN level processes can be. So I think there's quite a big discussion to be had about what follows, and we can start that discussion now, particularly in terms of the type of capacity we need to enhance delivery in the water sector, energy and food, whatever that may be. And we can learn from some of the shortcomings in the SDGs, because what we've seen is that a lack of capacity to implement is one of the major limitations in implementing the goals of the SDGs. And in SDG 6, the water SDG, there's a particular accelerator, it's called, which is around capacity development for water. And that is seen as something which, if we get that right, we can accelerate the implementation of the other parts of SDG 6. So I think that gives us a hint for how important we see capacity development and enhancement post-2030. And of course, that's 5 years' time. We're going to have hopefully a whole new cohort of people entering, because 5 years it's a long time and it's a short time.
Yeah.
And I think many people who will be at the symposium, young people, will be more senior and in more senior positions in 2030. So, we need to start that thinking now, so that when people are in those positions, they are, active and willing and really driving this agenda forward.
And if I may add, I think for me, one of the most important conversations that we need to have is around water justice and environmental sustainability. And this seems very obvious, I think, for many of us who are working in the water sector. But still, if you look at how water is distributed and to whom and which sectors, you still very much see that it's largely dependent also on where the money is and where the money flows. For instance, also now if you see with hydropower and bitcoins, the energy that is needed, but also water for cooling, you see really that money attracts water. And that is something we really need to address, because what I said earlier, the world is really not in a good state. There are really huge injustices in water, which creates tensions in countries, between countries, but also within communities, within society at large. There's lots of environmental degradation, water pollution, droughts, floods that we are needing to deal with. And in this relatively conservative era in the world, where climate change apparently is not an issue anymore, and where we cannot talk about gender and inclusivity anymore, I think we really need to have these difficult conversations and really need to realize that we need to look at the longer term, what is needed in the longer term when it comes to water, and not short economic gains or very profit-driven and actually very individualistic objectives, because that is what is really causing many of the tensions that are there in the water sector in the world. So for me, we need to have that conversation, and we need to make sure that water justice and environmental sustainability really is at the core of water management now and in the future.
Thank you so much for interesting insights about the symposium and what we're expecting and everything that we need to. I feel that you just now gave us some hints to think about before going to the symposium, and what to ask there, what to put or shed light on, especially that we're talking about our 5 years plan ahead, the youth and involvement in this 5-year plan, because at the end of the day, after this 2030, they will be also taking the lead in sustaining our environment, as you said, from the justice perspective, or from managing the water sector, and also looking at the nexus as a whole. So if we want to give a key message, or for these young professionals who are eager to make an impact in the water, what would be your take-home message? What would be your take-home message for these young professionals?
I would say don't be shy and trust your instincts. I think you have a lot to learn, but I think especially you also have a lot to bring to the water sector. And I think really honestly, only together we can solve the current and future challenges. So just join the conversation.
Yeah, I fully agree. Don't stand back. There are many opportunities. This conference is a small one, but there are other big symposia coming up where global agendas are set. The role of the youth is increasingly recognized, and I would say make use of those opportunities, find the entry points, and if there's no entry point, create one. I think I'm amazed at how effective young people are at influencing things. And
we have a lot to learn in that aspect, Graham.
I know, and exactly what we do see a little bit in much of the influencer space is a bit of a glamour bias. And water, energy, and food are not necessarily glamorous, but they are utterly fundamental to us.
Yeah.
And I would like to see some very effective youth influencers like yourselves, Anne and Rewa, really pushing this and spreading that message through the tools that you're very familiar with and with the skills that you have. So don't stand back. Please, let's see it.
Thank you so much for these very thoughtful key messages. And I want to reiterate what you, Graham, said about creating an entry point. I remember when I was in university and, going into this, like this workforce and so on, someone told me that, of course, there are a lot of there might not be a lot of solutions that you need to act upon, but sure, there is a lot of problem. And this is where you need to act, find the solution and start working on it. So this is a way also of saying that create this entry point. There are opportunities, look for them and you find your way. So thank you so much for these very thoughtful key messages. And of course, for everything that you've shared with us for the symposium. It was very valuable insights from you. So we are very much looking forward to this symposium and to see how we can, leverage on the discussions. Of course, as a reminder for our listeners, it will be from July 2nd to July 4th in a hybrid format so that it could accommodate most of our audience. So remember to visit to visit the symposium's website and to register for your online participation, and hopefully more slots will open for in-person participation. So and I really would do not miss this opportunity to be available, to voice your thoughts and to engage in the discussions.
Thank you so much, Rewa, and thank you once again to our guests. We had such a rich and wonderful conversations. And to our listeners in the Global WEF Nexus community, make sure that you check out the symposium and visit the website. That's going to be linked in this description. Until then, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Rewa.
Thank you.